As we consider the news today on the campaign trail, Kaylee Lyons, this is a big one for Nikki Haley. This is the big meeting with the whales, the big donors, who will likely give her a chance to continue campaigning here in the weeks ahead, knowing that money is so important to staying alive. But I'll tell you what, the folks at Ipsos, the polling firm, are already moving on to the general election. Sounding like a lot of Americans right now.
Yeah, just not Nikki Haley. She's talking about the establishment who wants to call this thing done and dusted already. She is not willing to do that. We'll see if these donors, big names well known to our television and radio audiences, Stan Druckenmiller, Ken Langone, all these kind of Wall Street names, if they continue to keep finanically backing her, there's no real reason why she can't stay in the race. But to your point, Joe, it's looking like it could be good money going after bad at this point if she can't start winning states, picking up more delegates, and actually pose a real challenge to Trump to secure the nomination.
Reinforces this idea that it's not about winning a bunch of early states. It's about collecting delegates just enough to hang on and maybe be there if something should happen to Donald Trump. But at Ipsos, they're running numbers today on the general election campaign. And, you know, we have to talk to Cliff Young when they come out with something that's making news here. Public Affairs President at Ipsos US. Cliff, it's good to see you. Welcome. The headline says it all here. The 2024 U.S. presidential election outcome is highly uncertain. It takes a lot to cast out this far. We're told not to pay too much attention to hypothetical national polls. So what are you getting at here?
Yeah, so basically we're not just looking at polls. This is a look at a series of models that we use at Ipsos, both in the United States and around the world. This is our first cut at the election from a forecasting perspective. Obviously, things can change. But when we say it's highly uncertain, we're not talking about distance from the election, temporal distance, how far out it is, because it's always uncertain. What we're really talking about is we have an uncertain economy that will really define the election for Biden or for Trump. And what we do more specifically is sort of detail those sorts of things that any sort of analyst should be looking at as the election season unfolds.
Well, on the subject of the economy, you point out how public opinion is typically a lagging indicator on the economy. That's something we talk about a lot here at Bloomberg TV and radio, this idea that the economic data is looking pretty good. Inflation's coming down. The labor market is still holding in there. And yet President Biden has really poor approval numbers on his handling of the economy. When does that lag actually kick in and potentially start helping him more?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that if it were related to unemployment, we would have a better idea. It's about 3 to 5 months. With inflation, we've had so little experience with inflation in the United States, we're not quite sure what the lag is. What I would say is the killer quarter, the quarter you should look at is the second quarter. If the numbers have not caught up by then for Biden, from an economic perspective, he should have problems looking forward. So at Ipsos, we're really looking at that second quarter. Our expectation is that things will improve. We don't know how much they will, though.
You refer to temporal fuzziness that your models suffer from, I guess, like all of us at this point here. Cliff, you mentioned the economy, its ability to change, creating a real fluid situation for us as we head into this election cycle, this election year. You also refer to the potential for black swan events, and we certainly saw that in the last election. That would have been something impossible to poll around, and that's what became known as COVID-19.
Yeah, exactly. Black swan events, we can set those aside because we just don't know, right? We'll know it when they're here, but we don't have them at this point. And so let's set them aside. What we're really looking at is the effect of the economy on the main issue. Today, the main issue is the economy, and Trump by far outpaces Biden on that issue. That's Biden's Achilles heel, the economy. But with an improving economy, our expectation is that we'll have other issues come to the fore. Immigration, crime, saving democracy. We're not quite sure which ones, and so we'll be tracking them very consistently over time at Ipsos. But that's the key issue or the key analytical point all of us should be looking at. What is the main issue? What is that thing that Americans are really worried about? Because they'll vote on that issue come November.
Well, on the subject of these issues, and you actually have a great chart kind of laying out the different models you are looking at and which ones favor the incumbent President Biden or Trump. And one of them is the idea that if the economy and the inflation is the main problem, that is strong Trump in terms of modeling. Yet we have been having a lot of conversations in recent weeks, and we saw this in New Hampshire and Iowa, that perhaps even more so than the economy, it's the border that is weighing on the minds of voters. Are you seeing that reflected in your polling? And how would that change perhaps the leans Trump versus leans Biden?
Yeah, so the economy obviously favors Trump. Immigration favors Trump as well. Right now, at this point, immigration is a Republican issue. It's something that mobilizes the Republican base, though Democrats are worried about it. It's a Republican issue. If it becomes the primary issue after the economy, Biden will have problems because Trump dominates that issue.
Boy, what can we expect from Ipsos on this? Now that you've schooled us a bit here on the method, how often are you going to update these going through the year?
Yeah, we're not going to, the models will be updating about every 2 months or so. We don't want to, overdo it. But what we will be updating much more consistently are those main issues, the evolution of what people are worried about, because in our mind, that will define the election. Will it be a Biden issue, an issue that favors Biden? Will it be a Trump issue, one that favors him? We don't know still. And so we'll be very closely following those specific questions over time.
And just finally, Cliff, because you are just talking about Biden and Trump, is Nikki Haley not even really a factor you need to be considering anymore?
Well, I would say the following. Trump dominates the Republican base. He is their champion. It's more than, relative to Nikki Haley, it's more than the majority. That's not to say she doesn't have some chance. I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves. Something could happen. But I think it's highly unlikely that she's able to sort of turn the tide. I mean, ultimately, if you just look at the polls today, every single national poll on the primaries has Trump in the lead. And most of the polls at the state level, once again, things can change. It's always possible. We should never count anyone out. But I think it's highly unlikely that she'll be the nominee.
All right, Cliff Young joining us from Ipsos. Thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate it.